it's interesting that the art that he commits to is music and ice sculptures, both of which are ephemeral, because, he can't write a novel.
Right. What others might deem stupid shit, matters. It's worth talking and thinking about, and so do we. We're sisters Tracy and Emily, collectively known as the Guy Girls. Every week, we take turns rewatching, researching, and reconsidering beloved media and sharing what we learn. Come overthink with us, and if you get value from the show, please consider supporting us. You can become a patron on Patreon or send us a one-time tip through Ko-fi. Both links are in the show notes. And thanks.
I'm Emily Guy Birkin, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit, because pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I will be discussing the 1993 classic comedy Groundhog Day with my sister, Tracy Guy Decker, and with you. Let's dive in. All right, Trace, I know you've seen this film.
Yeah.
I think it's likely we saw it together in the theater.
Does seem likely, doesn't it?
But I don't recall for sure.
Me neither.
Tell me what you remember about it.
Yeah, I loved this film. Like, I really loved it. Like, there's a lot of it in my head. Like, it is definitely furniture of the mind. So I actually don't want to share all the things I remember. I loved it. I loved it. It was like, I love Bill Murray because of Ghostbusters, although our Ghostbusters episode made me really rethink that. And because of this movie, I loved him in this movie, and I loved the way that I'm not sure I saw it this way. Like, in 93, I was, 17? Like, I don't think I saw it this way in 93, but I love the idea of sort of what kind of growth, like emotional, psychological growth we can get when forced to, like, think about and do the same thing over and over again. Like, how do we stop it from being actually doing the same thing over and over again? And it's changing yourself, right? And like that idea, like, I just love it so much, which is not something I got in 1993. Mm-hmm. I just was charmed by it, Mm-hmm. So, but there's definitely like moments, like vignettes that flash in my head, like of the groundhog on his lap, don't drive angry. And the Ned, the insurance salesman, and the pothole that he steps in. It's a doozy. Like, there's things that just like pop up, like like I'm having like pop up video right now in my head. So what's happening?
There's a blast from the past.
So yeah, there's a lot in there, and that's not what we're here to talk about. Why are we here? Why are we talking about Groundhog Day?
So there's two reasons we're talking about this. The first is, last year, I wrote a piece that went semi-viral for one of my clients, Fast Company, about the hidden money lessons in Groundhog Day. We published it right in time for February 2nd, and people loved it. And it's the kind of overthinking that I do, and tying some of these like lessons that Bill Murray's Phil Connors learns in the story to financial behavior. So it's been in my head since then. So that's one reason for it. The other reason I wanted to talk about it is because there are 3 different religious traditions that claim this movie as their own. Judaism, Buddhism, and Jesuit Christianity.
Really?
Yes. To the point where in 2003, there was this film series about religion in films. And the movies were all of like the capital F film that you think of.
Yeah.
And then Groundhog Day. And actually, so many people who were presenting wanted to put Groundhog Day that there was a squabble over who got to write up the reason for it in the the pamphlet.
Wow.
So this mainstream, very successful comedy really resonates with several religious teachings and belief systems. I, because I'm Jewish, see it as a very Jewish movie. And the two writers of the movie, Danny Rubin and Harold Ramis, who played Egon, both of whom, well, Danny Rubin is still alive, but Harold Ramis was Jewish, although he was married to a woman who was Buddhist, and he referred to himself as Buddhish.
You know, there's like a whole category like of Jewish Buddhists, the Jew-boos. There's enough of them that we needed a name. So yeah, Buddhish. Okay.
Yeah. Based on the relatively little I know about Buddhism, I can see that in there as well. And I can comprehend how a Christian could look at this movie and see it as a similar sort of echo of Christian theology. But I love that we get this very philosophical and spiritual look at what it means to be alive in a time loop movie.
Yeah.
A silly time loop movie.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, with Bill Murray and Don't Drive Angry.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like you, I've always loved this movie. I feel a very weird affinity to Groundhog Day, the holiday, because it's 2 days before my birthday.
Right.
And I've never liked having a winter birthday, and it's partially because I don't like winter. I get the seasonal affective disorder and all of that. But I've always felt like, okay, I can make it to my birthday. And then at that point, the worst that I get is 6 more weeks of winter. I can do it. So Groundhog Day was also like a way for me to be like, all right, I can make it. So those are the reasons why I wanted to bring it to our conversation today.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to the analysis, but first, remind me of the plot.
So I think I'll actually be concise this time, because it really is only one day. We meet Bill Murray's Phil Connors. He is a weatherman at a Pittsburgh news station who is going to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, which is a real place, although it was not filmed there. It was filmed in a small town in Illinois. Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, for the 4th time to cover the Groundhog Day event. There is a groundhog in Punxsutawney named Punxsutawney Phil. That's why Phil Connors he shares something with the groundhog. He has a new producer named Rita, who is played by Andie MacDowell, and the cameraman is Larry, played by Chris Elliott. Phil is not a very nice person. It is very clear that he is sarcastic, rude, grumpy, egotistical, domineering, just not a great person. He kind of flirts with Andie MacDowell's Rita a little bit, and it's clear that she is not interested, but a little too kindly to really shut him down. They get to Punxsutawney. He refuses to stay in the hotel because he hates the hotel. He's been there 3 times before. And Rita says, good, you're not staying here. You're at a bed and breakfast down the street. That is all happening on February 1st. We see all of February 2nd. He wakes up at 6 a.m. when the alarm in the bed and breakfast goes off, playing the local radio station. It's Sonny and Cher's I've Got You, Babe, and then 2 early morning DJs making jokes about the fact that it's Groundhog Day. He has a couple of interactions with people in the bed and breakfast, including Mrs. Lancaster, who works there. He gets to Gobbler's Knob, which is, again, that's real, although it's set up differently in the film than it is in the real world, where the Groundhog Day celebration takes place. He does his reporting. Meanwhile, there's this expected blizzard to come through, and he has made it clear, no, it's not gonna affect us. It's gonna go to Altoona. So as soon as they are done, he's like, let's pack it up. We're getting back to Pittsburgh, but the roads are closed because it is snowing so much. So they have to turn around and come back to Punxsutawney, where it is not yet snowing. It's snowing where it's closed off the highway. So he goes back to sleep in the bed and breakfast. And when he wakes up the next morning, it's February 2nd again. And so the first day, he goes through the whole thing really confused and acting a little weird, but just basically thinking like, okay, there's got to be something. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And we see him going to bed that night on the phone with someone like, saying like, can you guarantee that we're going to do this? Can we do that? And he's like, well, I don't know. What if there is no tomorrow? There wasn't one today, which is a great line. He has a pencil that he snaps and puts it on his bedside table as a like to test it. He wakes up again, February 2nd. Pencil is whole thing's happening again. So he tells Rita, there's something wrong with me. And she says, well, you should get your head examined. So he goes to a doctor who says like, well, everything looks fine, but if you want an MRI, you'd have to go to Pittsburgh. And he's like, I can't go to Pittsburgh. And so the doctor says, well, why don't you go see a psychiatrist? So he goes to see a psychiatrist who is really not equipped to help him. And the psychiatrist says, well, I think we should continue talking. Why don't you come back tomorrow? Which, same problem. And that night, he is at local bowling alley drinking with two of the locals, Gus and, I can't remember Gus's friend's name. And Gus says to him, like, you seem like a glass half empty kind of guy. Why don't you look on the bright side? And so the two locals are very, very drunk. And so Phil drives their car and realizes, like, wait a minute. If there's no tomorrow, there's no consequences. So he runs over a mailbox, like gets into a police chase, drives on the train tracks, nearly gets them killed, ends up in jail. And he wakes up again the next morning. It's February 2nd, and no one's come looking for him. So apparently there are no consequences. So he starts doing all kinds of stuff. He asks an attractive young woman what her name is, what high school she went to, and who her 12th grade English teacher was, so that the next day he can pretend that he went to school with her and seduce her. He uses his knowledge of what happens to steal money out of a Brink security truck. He eats, like, there's this great scene of him binging all this food on a table. So it basically is like, there is nothing I can't do. And then he sets his sights on, because he has always had a little crush on Rita, he sets his sights on trying to seduce her. And so we see a montage of him over and over and over again trying to get in her good graces. So he learns what her favorite drink is. He learns where she went, that she went to college for French poetry, and memorizes a French poem. He finds out what she wants from a man and says that that's what he is. Like, she says she wants marriage and kids, and so he pretends that that's what he wants too. And he ends up having one almost perfect day, and she comes back to his room with him, and they're kissing, and she's like, I need to go now. And he starts pressuring her, because he knows if it doesn't happen now, it never will, or at least he's going to have to do all of this work again. And she ends up slapping him and is really disgusted and horrified by him. We then see a montage of her slapping him over and over and over again. And it's at that point that he kind of loses hope. And so we see him, the don't drive angry thing that he's like, this is never going to end unless I take the groundhog out. And so he steals a truck and that has the groundhog in it and drives it over a cliff. He wakes up the next day. He takes a toaster into the tub with him, wakes up the next day, jumps off a building, wakes up the next day. So that happens over and over again. And then we see him come to Rita and say, like, I think I'm a god. And she's like, no. 12 years of Catholic school, I can tell you're not God. He's like, I'm not God. I'm a god. I don't know, maybe I might be. And so he tries to prove it to her by showing how much he knows about everyone in the town. And she is a little freaked out, but she's like, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on you all day, because you see what's going on. And so at the end of that day, they are in his room at midnight. She thinks like, oh, I thought you were going to disappear, or I was going to disappear. And he's like, no, it doesn't happen until 6 a.m. So he gets 6 hours into February 3rd. She stays, like, at midnight, he says, like, you don't have to stay if you don't want to, but if you want to, you may. And we see several hours later, she's fallen asleep. She's kind of in that, like, half asleep, half awake, kind of murmuring, like, I'm not asleep, I'm not tired. And he tells her that he doesn't deserve someone who is as kind and good as she is. But if ever he had a chance to be with her, he would love her for the rest of his life. And she doesn't really hear it. She says, "Did you say something?" And then he wakes up alone in the room. And that's kind of a turning point for him. He starts changing the way he interacts with the world. It starts with, there is a homeless man that he has walked past and not given money to over and over and over again. And we see him first give him money. And then we see later he is at a hospital. He brought the old man in who had died. And the nurse, like, sometimes people just die. And he's like, not today. And so we see him trying again and again to save his life. He goes to, there's a piano teacher nearby, and he bribes her with $1,000 to kick out her current student so he can learn piano. He learns ice sculpting. He saves a bunch of different people from small everyday perils. There's a little boy who falls out of a tree. And interestingly, the first time I ever noticed this, when he's at the hospital with the old man, the little boy's in the background with his leg broken. And I was like, I never realized that before. So he saves a little boy. He changes a tire for 3 little old ladies who get a flat. The mayor is choking on a piece of steak, and he gives him the Heimlich maneuver. Just basically is being, helpful man about town. In the evening, there's a party. Rita all day has been trying to figure out where he is, and he's at the party playing piano. And she is so impressed with everything he's done. And there is as part of the party, they have a bachelor auction. So one of the residents of the town pushes him forward to be the first bachelor. And so there's a bidding war, and then Rita wins it by emptying out her wallet. And I think it's $339.88.
It's just like holding her checkbook up.
Yeah. And so they go off and have a date. Basically, he does a snow sculpture of her face, and he is just talking to her, without an agenda. He's just getting to know her. It seems like a lovely day, and he expects to wake up alone again on February 2nd. Well, the next morning he wakes up. It's Sonny and Cher again, but a different part of the song. And Rita reaches over him and turns off the alarm clock, saying it's too early. And he's like, something's different. So he asks her, what are you doing here? She said, well, you said stay. So I stayed, and I bought you. I bought you in the auction. And she's also, and I really appreciate this, the film, she's like, where was this energy last night? I could have used it. So to make it clear that all they did was sleep. And so they head out. He says some things that I think would be freaky to poor Rita. He says, let's live here. We'll rent first. But that is the happy ending of the film.
Cool.
Oh, there's so much good stuff in here.
All right. So where do we start?
So let's talk about Phil's kind of moral arc.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking a lot about what we said about Billy Crystal's Harry from When Harry Met Sally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, apparently, they floated several different actors. Actually, Tom Hanks was one of the ones that they thought about doing, but he was too nice.
Yeah, he's too nice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There were a couple others, I'm blanking on who, but they wanted someone who had an edge, who you could not, it was possible to not like.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, during filming, when Harold Ramis would be trying to let Bill Murray know what he should be doing in this scene, he'd just be like, no, good Phil or bad Phil? Which am I today?
That's what Bill Murray would say?
Yeah. And I think that it's really, I think what's important about his moral arc is that, like Harry, he goes from thinking of the people around him as non-player characters to recognizing that they are full and complete human beings. And it is amazing that he does that, because technically they are. So because like a video game, he respawns over and over again, and nothing happens to the other people.
Right. They do the same thing every single time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So like that is, I think, really, it's tremendous. It's a tremendous thing that allows us to see that he recognizes how egotistical and self-centered he was even before he got stuck in the time loop. Because he is doing something that would be very hard to do when you know that nothing matters to the people around you. Especially that last kind of perfect day that he has. So he has a very good day with Rita when he starts off saying, like, I think I'm a god, and like, I can prove to you by everything. At the end of that day, she disappears. And it's because he's still thinking of himself. He's still thinking of like, this is what I am, rather than thinking about like, what can I do to make your life better?
Yeah. Yeah. Or even like what's coming up for me as we're talking about this film and about like the moral arc and your point that like they are non-player characters. But what's coming up for me is sort of the idea that like Groundhog Day forced him to like, no, look at it. He's like, yeah, I'm looking at it. No, look at it.
Mm-hmm.
No, look at them. Right? Like, and it's not, and so even in the like, I'm a god, like I'm looking at them, I know where they're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not actually looking at them.
Yes.
Right. And that was the point that you made about Harry in When Harry Met Sally, is that he wasn't actually like worthy to be our love interest, to be Sally's love interest, until he started actually seeing her as a full human being.
Mm-hmm.
And he got there through his own pain to a certain extent. And I think that like, so there's a little bit of that here, but you know, the pain, but also just friggin' stick-to-itiveness of this time loop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and that gets to something that I think is very important, especially we are recording this 10 days before the inauguration, which is that early on, Phil has an agenda. So, you know, he's doing things, no consequences. And so like he asks, her name is Nancy, this attractive young woman, what her name is, her high school and 12th grade English teacher, because, you know, if you put in the quarters in the machine over here, sex will come out over there.
Right.
It's an agenda.
Completely transactional.
Yes. And so, and he does that with, you know, figuring out when the Brink Securities truck would allow him to steal money. He does that with like whatever it is to like cut off the Mrs. Lancaster, who is the manager of the bed and breakfast, asks him chit chat questions that he's really uncomfortable with, like he just not uncomfortable with, he doesn't like. And so he knows what she's going to say. So he preempts it and amuses himself by doing that instead of, you know, actually interacting with this person. And so he tries to bring that sort of transactional nature, that agenda, to seducing Rita, and it doesn't work. And it's in part because of who Rita is. And that's when he gets, when like over and over and over again, he's putting all of his work in and he's not getting the sex out. And he gets depressed and starts killing himself. And the reason why I think this is so important at this particular moment in time is because I had this realization last year or the year before, where I have been pretty politically active since I was a late teenager. Like now, I mean, I'm not going to say I would not call myself an activist, but I have voted without fail in every election that I was eligible for. I actually, even before the first Trump presidency, made calls to my representatives. I do stuff. I consider it part of my civic duty to know what's going on in my country and in my locality. Like I try to do stuff. And it feels like the world has gotten worse in the time that I've done that. You know, I truly believe in it, and the world has gotten worse. And I mentioned this to my therapist, and she pointed out she had read something or seen something talking about when the enormous, gorgeous cathedrals in Europe were being built. The people who started building them knew that it was going to take 100 years and that their children's children might not see it done. But that didn't mean they stopped. And that resonated with me because I'm a writer. And so while I do write because I want to get published, when I am focused on writing to publish, I'm miserable. Whereas if I just write for the joy of it, it is fulfilling and meaningful and wonderful. And that allowed me to kind of remember, like, you know, I'm not politically active because it's going to, you know, if I put the quarters in, the better legislation comes out. What a wonderful world it would be if that's how it worked. I do it because it fulfills something in me. It feels good. I respect myself for doing it. And so the doing it is the meaning. The meaning is in the action. And that is what Phil learns, because at a certain point you can say, like, what he does is useless, quote unquote, because it all resets again the next day. But that doesn't matter because there's meaning in doing it. There is self-respect, there is joy, there is, you know, just fulfillment in learning the piano, in helping these 3 little old ladies who are a little overwhelmed with the flat tire, in making sure that the mayor doesn't choke on a piece of beef, in trying to show kindness and save the homeless man, even if he is doomed. There is, in all of those actions, there is meaning, whether or not it's still there the next day for each of these people.
I think that's all right. I completely agree. And I think the thing that I like a lot, that I think I named at the beginning too, like the reason that Rita doesn't disappear at the end of the movie is because ultimately now he has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like he's done all this work, which in the time loop doesn't actually change the world, at least not in any lasting way, but it has changed him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what interrupts
mm-hmm.
the constant resetting. That's what interrupts the loop. And I think that's a significant and important, like, philosophical, like, I see how this is Jewish, right? Like the fundamentals of Musar, like Jewish ethics, is like we change our behavior to change our hearts and our souls.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Phil does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There is a very interesting sermon that I think Kol Nidre sermon that I will link in the show notes, from a rabbi, I think in England, talking about this movie and comparing it to Jonah, actually. So listeners, the story of Jonah, you probably remember Jonah being eaten by the whale or the giant fish. But once that happens because he does not want to be a prophet. When he finally accepts the fact that he has to do this, he goes to, please correct me if I'm wrong. Nineveh. I thought it was Nineveh. Goes to Nineveh saying, like, God's going to destroy Nineveh unless you change your ways. And they do. And so God does.
And he's pissed off.
Then he's pissed off because, like, look, I came all this way and you didn't destroy them.
Well, and even says, like, I knew you were merciful. That's why I didn't want to come to Nineveh in the first place.
Yes. And so there's this very interesting comparison saying, like, where the rabbi is basically talking about how Phil has a similar kind of reaction. Like, it's going to reset anyway, so why do I even bother?
Mm-hmm.
But once he, like, embraces his role, he is allowed to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that just lovely and fascinating. The other aspect of it, and this is what it shares with Buddhism that I see as very Jewish, is in Judaism, we do a lot of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
So we have special prayers that we repeat every week on Shabbat. We have the prayers that we repeat every year on Yom Kippur. And
For the more Orthodox among us, there are prayers that happen every day, multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also do, like, we also consider ourselves to be time bound in a way that is, specifically during the Passover Seder, we talk about when we were there.
As if
Yeah.
we were there. Mm-hmm.
And as if it is happening again
Mm-hmm.
and again
Mm-hmm.
and again. And so one of the things that I really like about this aspect of our faith is that we always get another chance to try again.
Mm-hmm.
We always have another opportunity. So the year that we moved here to Milwaukee, Passover is my favorite holiday. And I was overwhelmed and didn't know how to put together anything. And my kids were 5 and 2 at the time. And I felt like I'm being a bad Jew, a bad mother by not like celebrating Passover with them. But I got another opportunity the next year and another opportunity the next year. And like those like stack onto each other. And any one might be forgettable, but they all together create this kind of mosaic of repetition. And so sometimes I feel it, like I feel the bracha when I say it, and sometimes I just say it and it doesn't feel like anything.
Listeners,
but it's meaningful.
Bracha means blessing.
Yes. It's meaningful because I do it.
Yeah.
And so that is, I think, a lot of what Jewish scholars and just Jews see that resonates with them from this film. But it also is an important echo of Buddhist ideas of the cyclical nature of the world, and samsara, which is about, I'm not a scholar of this, but it's the cycle of birth, life, death, rebirth over and over again.
Right.
And then in Buddhism, the idea is that life is suffering. And the way that we escape samsara is try to relieve suffering, which we see Phil do. And he does it without any agenda, without any kind of transactional idea. I mean, there is a very funny moment when he catches the kid falling out of the tree and saves him from a broken leg. He like, you see him going, "What do you say? What do you say?" And
You
like,
never say thank you.
You never say thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe. So like, what I also appreciate is like, Phil's allowed to be human.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
he is a much better man, but he is still a little annoyed.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to hear, can you walk me through, or maybe you can't, but can you walk me through, like, what's the Christian, like, claim to this movie?
That I have trouble with. I will tell you the little bit that I read. I think it's about like what Erica mentioned in our Christmas Carol, or
in the Muppet Christmas Carol,
like to die to yourself in a much more metaphorical rather than literal way. Like Ebenezer Scrooge literally dies to himself, and I mean, Phil literally does when he is dying by suicide over and over again. But that does not cause him to die to himself. Like he's still saying, like, I think I'm God. And it's once he realizes he needs to focus outward that he is able to like escape this kind of purgatory and reach his reward.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
I mean, there's certainly like the good works, like like from Scrooge too, that like make the world better, like the power that you have with good works to make. Okay. All right, cool.
And again, one of the things that I appreciate about how this film shows this is that Phil has that perfect day because he is present in the moment in that perfect day. He's not trying to get to February 3rd.
That's Buddhist.
Yes. And it's also, I feel like it's also Jewish because we do mitzvot, so good deeds, not to get something, but because they're mitzvot. Like,
I mean, God told us to, they're commandments.
yes, but not doing them is not something like that's going to.
Depends on who you ask.
Well, tikkun olam. I mean, that is, we do that because it's because of not to get anything from it.
Tikkun olam, listeners, means repair of the world, and it comes from an old idea that something fundamental sort of shattered when God was creating the world, and now it's our job to like find those pieces and put them back together, and we do that by doing good deeds and putting good out into the world, and and repair the world is, you know,
what it literally means.
Fairly straightforward. Yeah, I mean, we don't do it for some sort of reward in the like kind of way, like popularized version that sometimes folks will talk about. Reward in terms of like in the afterlife or something.
Yeah. So I think it also relates to Pirkei Avot, which is like the teachings of our fathers.
Yeah, but it's like a long book, and that's one sentence in it.
Okay. My favorite part of the Pirkei Avot, which is that you are not obligated to complete the work, but neither shall you desist from it, or neither may you desist from it.
Right.
And that's something I shared with a friend recently on social media. She has been very locally active in politics, running for office and things like that in a very, very conservative area, and just getting pummeled and feeling like not knowing if she's doing the right thing by deciding to step back from it. And so I shared that line with her because I find that very helpful, because it reminds us that, you know, everything does not rely on us, but we can do what we can do.
Right.
And as I mentioned at the top of this, I think it's really helpful to look to like this movie and this idea in the coming years, as you know, there's some really scary shit coming down the pike.
Yeah.
Because it is so easy to say, well, we're not going to fix it, so might as well give up.
Right.
And have like the in-between moment that Phil does, where he's like, I just want out of this. But that is no path forward.
Right.
And recognizing like this might not do anything, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Right. Right. Brian Stevenson said that hope is the enemy of injustice.
Yes.
So,
and I in fact think that we have a responsibility to hope.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that I wrote in the Fast Company article. Part of what's tough about the situation that Phil finds himself in is that there is no tomorrow. And so that means that he can't plan for tomorrow. He can't make things better for his future life because he's sitting in this moment right now. And in my day job as a financial writer, I have had people say to me, like, I don't see the point in saving for retirement because climate change is going to negate anything. You know, like if we've got a fascist government, why should I be worried about Social Security? And my feeling is like, well, the forces of chaos and evil have already won if we decide that.
Yeah, if we step away. Yeah.
So live in the moment, but hope for and plan for a better future.
Sure.
And the Phil learning how to play the piano is actually a really good example of that, because there is very little he can carry from one day to the next.
Right.
I mean, it's
his
all
knowledge.
knowledge.
It's just in
That's
his head.
all he can carry from one day to the next. So like it's interesting that the art that he commits to is music and ice sculptures, both of which are ephemeral, because, you know, he can't write a novel.
Right.
He can't paint a painting.
Not and have it stick around. Yeah.
And not have it stick around. But he finds a way to invest in his future.
Right.
With
even in a single day.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
That is made to be ephemeral.
That's really nice.
That I feel like shows a great way of committing to self-care.
Yeah.
And is just, it's lovely. And he gets to his piano teacher is so funny because he tells her every day, I've never had a lesson before today, which is true. And so we see her like so proud of him playing, like, that's my student.
Right.
When he's clearly an expert.
I'd love to hear more about the Fast Company article or like the conclusions that you drew in it.
Yeah. So one of the things I talk about is, live in the moment, but work for a better future. And so he learns to do that, as I mentioned, with the ice sculpting and music. But to apply this to our finances, I was talked about, we tend to have like binary thinking where it's we either think like retirement's never going to happen, so I'm going to live like there's no tomorrow, or I'm despairing, like I'm worried, so I'm not going to do anything. So, which is when he continues to kill himself. So like we avoid spending any money for fear of an uncertain future.
So we act as if we can spend money now or we can spend money later, and we have to choose between the two.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But you need to find a way to do both.
Mm-hmm.
Like live in the moment and plan and hope for a better future.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The other moment, so early on, I think on his third iteration, he's wondering like, why couldn't have been this day when I was in the Virgin Islands? I met a girl, we ate lobster, we made love. And so he like laments being stuck in Western Pennsylvania in February, which is
legit. It's legit. Yeah.
But then he learns to embrace where he is. Like make the most of where you are. Because you can't change the fact that you are where you are.
Right.
And so in terms of like finances and career and stuff like that, we are often stuck somewhere we didn't choose. Dead-end job, location we didn't choose, difficult family situation. But if you find what's good in where you are, you're going to be much happier, and it's not going to get you out of there any faster, but neither is moping about it.
Right. Sure.
And then the last thing that I talk about is the only thing you have control over is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so like Phil is trying to control other things, starting with like on February 1st, he's saying like, there's no blizzard.
Right.
While it's coming down, it's just a couple of flakes. I make the weather. And he tries to control Rita, by figuring out all the different ways that he can respond to what she might do or say. And then comes to realize that, no, I am the only one I can control. And so in terms of finances, like people will put their, like the agency on other things. Like they'll be mad about the inheritance that, didn't come through, or mad that the stock market died at the wrong time, or like complain about, don't make enough money. And all you can change is yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you need to make plans and do things based on who you are and what you can do, rather than trying to control other people or putting your hopes on what other people will do.
Cool. Nice. Thank you. So does this film pass the Bechdel test?
Sort of, yes. There are actually...
there are a number of named female characters.
Yes. So Rita and Doris, who works at the diner, talk to each other. At one point, Rita tells her these sticky buns are to die for.
Okay. So they talk about the sticky buns.
Yeah. And then at another point, while Phil is trying to prove to her that he knows everything, he says like, oh, this is Doris, she da-da-da-da. And Doris, oh yeah, that's right, to her, as do a couple of other women in the diner. And then the three little old ladies with the flat tire, I know that they have names, but it's one of those like, like Phil knows their name.
Okay.
I don't know if I do.
And they talk to each other about something besides Phil?
Yes, they talk about like the flat tire. And then when he starts jacking it up, they're like, oh, it's an earthquake. No, it's not an earthquake. So they're talking to each other about the circumstances they're in.
Okay, cool.
So,
and just a reminder, listeners, the Bechdel test from Alison Bechdel from her zine, like to watch out for. The questions are there at least two female characters? Do they both have names? Do they talk to each other about something other than a boy or man? Cool. Okay. Anything we haven't covered that you want to make sure you talk about?
So there's one thing that I'm trying to figure out how I feel about.
Cool. Let's do it.
So you mentioned Ned Ryerson, played brilliantly by Stephen Tobolowsky, who is my go-to reference for insurance salespeople.
Totally.
He is really over the top, like refuses to take no for an answer, like, ignores social cues, and then ends with like, watch out for that first step, it's a doozy, when Phil steps in this big puddle of water, icy water. So Ned is really annoying, and we are not supposed to like Ned. And one of the like kindest things that we see Phil do is on that perfect day, he actually buys a whole bunch of insurance from Ned.
Right.
And Ned's like, it's the best day of my life.
Right.
And Rita and Phil are able to shake Ned off. And we see him try a couple of different things to get Ned to leave him alone throughout the different days. Like he pushes him, he punches him, like runs away from him, stuff like that. But early on, after Phil has the realization, I'm going to try to make the best of this, we see Ned Ryerson, greet him like Ned Ryerson, like not like it's not over the top, because like Phil's very sarcastic. It's more like Ned Ryerson, like and shakes his hand, and then he grabs him and hugs him and says, "I don't know where you're going, but can you call in sick?" As if he's hitting on him, and it gets Ned to be like, "Oh, I gotta go," and run away. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, because on the one hand, gay panic is not a good look.
Mm-hmm.
On the other, in some ways, Phil is using what Ned does back at him, which is like just ignoring social cues.
Also an assumed familiarity that is inappropriate for the actual relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because they went to high school together. So like they do know each other. Mm-hmm. So there's no other like homophobia in the film. There's one of the people that Phil says like, oh, and there's this person. There's a young man named, I think, Kenny. He's like, he collects this. He started working here when he had to leave Penn State, and he's gay. And he's like, oh yeah, I am. And that's
just matter of fact.
Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to mention that because, when I saw it in 1993, I thought that was hilarious, the way that Phil handled Ned. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I am thinking about how you will see male allies use that kind of behavior on men who are creeping on women, which is, thank you. But we do see like Phil and Larry, played by Chris Elliott, the cameraman, are over familiar with women. And we don't, we see Larry get shot down, and like obviously Phil gets shot down over and over again. So maybe it's just recognizing like this over familiarity is not okay. Stop it. But it stood out to me, and I wanted to kind of bring that up and see if you had any thoughts.
I mean, one thing that occurs to me is that like they put the gay panic on the guise of the guy who is so unlikable, right? We don't see Phil do it. Yeah, I mean, he elicits it, but we don't see him express it. Certainly not as good Phil. Right. And so like that does feel like feels like it mitigates it a bit to me, since Ned is so unlikable. So he's not a villain. I don't think there is a villain in this film.
No.
but he's very unlikable. So having
Mm-hmm.
it be him, and I
Mm-hmm.
do think that the kind of meaning that you just sketched out, we never see overfamiliarity work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when it is manufactured, it really doesn't work. I mean, maybe that's actually the allegory, is that the synecdoche of Phil with Ned
Mm-hmm.
is what Phil's trying to do with Rita when he gets
Mm-hmm.
slapped over and over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
The only thing that takes away from that a little bit is that this happens after he stops doing that. This is part of his, like, I'm a whole new Phil.
Oh, interesting. It's also, he's doing it on purpose with Phil.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
with Ned, excuse me. He's doing it on purpose with Ned. He knows how Ned will react.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe the whole new person knows that overfamiliarity is going to make this guy go away, because it made Rita go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I would not want to see that joke written into a 2025 remake of Groundhog Day,
Yeah.
I think. Or at least I'd want more nuance
Mhm.
around it, or
Mhm.
commentary or something.
Mm-hmm.
In 93, like looking back on it, I also thought it was hilarious, by the way. And with the other things that we've just named, like, I'm not offended, I guess, is where I'm landing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's not a good look, but Ned's not a good look.
Mm. Bing.
Yeah. So, Ned's not a good look. And like, in some ways, it's Phil kind of like, I got your number, asshole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, to be fair to Phil and the film, like, his perfect day, he buys a ridiculous amount of life insurance and other insurance from Ned. So, like, he is kind to someone who is,
even to the asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
cool. All right. So I guess in conclusion, it's complicated. All right. Anything else before I try and reflect back to you what I heard?
Oh, with the one thing, one of the reasons why I think this film is brilliant is that there is never any explanation for the time loop. There was originally written an explanation that Phil was cursed by an ex-girlfriend or something like that, and they decided to cut it out. And I think that is exactly right.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. The mystery, that's part of the power of it, is the mystery, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Which, like, in a recent episode, we named the fact that, like, George Lucas forgot when he was making the prequels and, like, gave us this whole midichlorian exposition thing about the Force, which is like, come on, dude, just let it be magic.
Yeah.
It's the mystery's kind of like what's cool.
Yeah.
Especially, I also think not having the explanation is part of what allows us to be so beloved by these multiple faith traditions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think if he had been cursed by an ex-girlfriend, I'm not sure that it would have been like, the overarching messaging and meaning would still be there, but it would be harder to embrace in the same way, I suspect, if we had a specific named reason for the loop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, because we do talk about, like, how filmmakers make their decisions and things like that. I read today that because the level of snow would change from, like, day to day, because you get the several months or weeks anyway to film this, they did all of the day, like all of the repeated moments
in the
at
same
the same
day.
time,
Same day.
So when he meets Ned Ryerson, they did that, like, there's 5 of them, I think, maybe 6, and they did all of them on the same day to make sure that.
Oh, wow. So he was stepping into that puddle over and over.
Yeah,
it was like his own personal Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Wowie, wow. That's cool. That's cool to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was just really fascinating. The artistry of, the fact that I noticed that the little boy with the broken leg, like, never. I've seen this movie so many times. The first time I ever noticed it.
Yeah, they thought it through.
Yeah, and then like they really did an excellent job of making sure the extras were where they're supposed to be, and I mean, like it just the level of detail for a movie about a time loop. It's just I love when filmmakers take
The craft
mainstream seriously. Yeah, well, especially when it's like for mainstream enjoyment, you know, or even lowbrow enjoyment, when they're like, we know this is silly, but we're taking it seriously.
Yeah, that's a thing that regular listeners to Deep Thoughts will know that we like, right? Like I feel like we talked about that with Clue and with Michael Jackson's Thriller, and like sort of the idea of like taking the medium and the content seriously without taking oneself seriously is something that the Guy sisters tend to be drawn to.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. So Emily, congratulations. You, with this single episode, have broken all of the conventional taboos and talked about religion, politics, and money. Mazel tov, my sister. Mazel tov.
This is why I don't get invited to dinner parties.
So, religion. Groundhog Day is claimed by multiple faith traditions as being allegorical and somehow like resonant and important for understanding their theology, notably Judaism, Buddhism, and at least some forms of Christianity. You named Jesuit when we first started talking. So, and these two Jewish sisters are the least clear on how it's Christian. So, listeners, if you want to like write in and like let us know, like, love to hear.
Appreciate it, because we're driving blind here. I
mean, not totally blind, but like, you know, we're talking like, I don't know, like 2100 or 2200 here. It's just that's definitely not 2020.
I did need Erica to define to yourself for me recently.
Right. But the ways in which it is Jewish and Buddhist is sort of this. For the Jewish, like I named Musar in particular, which is Jewish ethics, which is 1,000-year-old discipline that has us change our behavior in order to change our heart and our souls. And so Groundhog Day definitely shows us that. And we also see that he gets out of the loop when his reason for behaving stops being himself. So that also feels really sort of spiritual, theological. In terms of Buddhist resonance, we see again sort of his move to alleviate suffering is what gets him out of the loop. And also sort of the focus on the now feels both Jewish and Buddhist, and the recognition that one has to change oneself because one can't change the world. Also both Jewish and Buddhist, and maybe Christian. I don't know. I've studied a tiny bit. Anyway, so that was religion. Politics. We talked about the fact that, put as succinctly as Brian Stevenson can, who is a very succinct and beautifully elegant speaker, hope is the enemy of injustice. And so this movie, which we even see how it leads to nihilism, like nothing he does matters in a very sort of literal sense, if what we mean by matters is get out of the loop. And yet the sort of fundamental thesis of the story is that it actually does matter, even if it doesn't get him out of the loop. Those are not the same thing. And so your point in terms of politics, you used the very succinct and beautifully elegant phrase from Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, which is in book 2, that says, you are not obligated to complete the work, but neither may you desist from it. And so that sort of idea that that's that idea that we do what we can, even if it's not going to be done, which is so also like exactly summed up in the cathedral builders of medieval and medieval Europe, who would, know that it would take 100 years to finish the thing that they were breaking ground on. And they did it anyway, because they were not, they were not free to desist. and it was still worth doing. So, okay. So that was religion and politics. And religion and politics. And then we talked about money because you wrote this semi-viral article for Fast Company about some of the money lessons that come out of Groundhog Day, which include like finding a balance between sort of living in the now and planning and hoping for the future. Like you're allowed to spend now, but you also need to save. So find a way to get a balance with your income. And there were others that, let me see, there was,
you can only control yourself.
You can only control yourself. So like, don't like sit around moping about what the stock market is doing, figuring out what you can do. And there was a third. What was your third?
Make the most of where you are.
Right. It doesn't matter that you're in Punxsutawney and not in the Virgin Islands. Like Punxsutawney will give back what you put into it. Mm-hmm. So you make the most of where you are. We talked very briefly about gender. This movie does pass the Bechdel test. And then we spent a little bit of time sort of thinking through a moment when Phil is actually kind of at the end, when he does the best day that actually gets him out of the loop. When he does the best day, he buys a bunch of insurance from Ned. But in an earlier iteration, after he's sort of decided to be a better guy and make the most of it, he bypasses Ned Ryerson, this really obnoxious insurance salesman who we went to high school with, by being over familiar with him and sort of making a pass at him that makes Ned run away. And so we spent a little time sort of talking that through, and like, it's not a good look. Like leaning on gay panic is not a good look. The movie makers put that bad look on a bad guy, or at least a unlikable guy. And so sort of thinking through like in the meta, like what messages are we getting for that? And I think we landed on it's complicated. And for 1993, like it feels like actually, you know, if not progressive, at least not regressive for 93. Mm-hmm. Finally, you brought in this really interesting thing in thinking through the artistry and like the gravitas with which the filmmakers took their task, not their subject, but their task, insofar as to make sure that like the snow and the environment was the same for each of the kind of loops. They filmed all of the Ned Ryerson outdoor parking lot scenes on the same day to make sure that the external stuff was the same. And insofar as they took such great pains to make sure the extras were in exactly the right spot, to like on the day, one of the days he doesn't save the boy who falls out of the tree, we see him in the background with his leg broken, and those sorts of like echoes throughout the movie, so that it does have like a really rich and comprehensive whole that we believe this single day in this one place is happening over and over again. And you noted that they did that, and we noted that the taking one's craft seriously and not oneself is something that we both tend to be really drawn to, that really yields beautiful product and also can move media along and like lead to new and unexpected and unconventional outputs. And I see that you think I forgot something and you need to add it. So let me hear it.
It's not that I think you forgot something. I'm realizing that is what Phil is doing on his last day, is he is taking his craft seriously. We even see that, we see his broadcast several times, and they tend to be like phoned in,
sort of perfunctory,
perfunctory or just nasty. And he really, like he talks about like he brings in Chekhov and you know, like talks about what winter is, and like, and everyone says like that was beautiful. And so he is taking the craft seriously, but not himself, because he knows he's going to do it again tomorrow.
I love it.
So, and the one other thing I wanted to mention that we talked about is what he builds for himself. Is he realizes, now part of this is at one point Rita says she'd want a guy who plays an instrument. So like he's interested in music in part because it'll get the girl. But he chooses music and ice sculpting as things to learn because he can hold on to it from one day to the next, and because they are both kind of ephemeral arts.
Right.
And
right.
I love that. There are things that cannot be taken from you.
Yeah. Right. Right. Beautiful. Okay. The one other thing I also want to lift back up in my kind of recap is that we named that Phil is sort of similar to Harry from When Harry Met Sally, insofar as the story arc, that like Harry doesn't become a guy who's worthy of Sally's love and the viewers kind of affection, like to be our hero, until he starts realizing that other people are fully formed human beings, and specifically that women are not just vaginas with legs. Mm-hmm. And Phil goes through a similar transformation, except in some ways his is even more noteworthy because, as you put it, Harry and Phil both like win, if you will. They both kind of like grow when they stop treating other people as non-player characters in the role-playing game. But the truth is that for Phil, they are non-player characters because they do the exact same thing every single time. So his being able to fully see them is in some ways even more admirable, or a bigger shift than with Harry and When Harry Met Sally. Cool. All right. So next time, Em.
Yeah, you're bringing something to me next time. Right?
I am bringing you my big thoughts, my deep thoughts about Big, the Tom Hanks movie.
Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it again. I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm a little bit worried, to be honest, but I'm excited. So see you then.
I'll see you then.
Do you like stickers? Sure, we all do. If you head over to guygirlsmedia.com/sign up and share your address with us, we'll send you a sticker. It really is that easy. But don't wait. There's a limited quantity. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes. Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?